We're talking Darren Waller was almost the Miami Dolphin. Durham Smythe's contract details I can go over a little bit more. And the Dolphins are kind of focusing on bringing in some depth on the defensive line. So I got some updates for you. What is up, Finn fans? Yes, it's a Hump Day Wednesday. And I got nothing specific. I don't know what I named the video, but I got a few updates and a few deets that I want to give you guys. First and foremost, how's your week going? How's your Wednesday? We're on the opposite end. We're heading towards the weekend. We're going down the hill. It is now currently 5:42. Some of you guys driving home from work. Some of you guys heading to work, to the night crew. Keep on keeping on. Keep doing your thing like a chicken wing. But I want to give you guys some updates on some things. So first and foremost, I'm gonna minimize myself real quick. We're gonna look at Durham Smythe's contract. So Over the Cap came out with his contract right here. It's got a ton of roster bonuses, base salary bonuses, pregame bonuses. This is where you always want to look, is at the guaranteed salary, right? He's due 1.08 mil. Then next year he's due 1.25 mil. Right? That's what you want to look at, right? Because look at his cap hit. His cap hit is 3.1. And then next year his cap hit is 4.4 million. If the Dolphins cut him next year, they save about 3 million, right? I like this move because of how critical and how good Durham Smythe was with us when it came to when Durham Smythe was out there, you didn't know if they were blocking or running or passing, because he had the ability to also go out, block and release and go out to the flat and get us the 5-6 yards we needed to get the first down. If you look here at contract ranking, he's the 27th ranked contract at tight end. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. I really like it. But yeah, you can see here it's a 3 million. If they cut him today, which I doubt they will. I think this is saying it's a $6 million savings, $3 million, and then $1 million savings. And then post June 1st, they would lose money. They're gonna cut him. So 3.3 next year if they wanted to move on from him. So it's a good contract. It's not a crazy contract. It's not a ridiculously high contract for the type of tight end he is. Well, we'll talk about tight ends. If you didn't see me and Broshmo breaking down the tight ends, I'm going to start doing mock drafts too. We're getting close to the draft. How far are we from the draft? It is now April 5th. And we are tomorrow will be 3 weeks from the draft. So I'm going to start doing mock drafts. I'm going to start really getting into draft stuff. The other thing I want to talk about, speaking of tight ends, Drew Rosenhaus said that the Dolphins and the Packers were negotiating a trade with the Raiders for Pro Bowl tight end Darren Waller last year. He was nearly traded last offseason. And when I heard that, I was like, damn. The compensation. If we traded for Darren Waller, for a fact we were going to get rid of Mike Gesicki at that point. And then that $10 million on his franchise tag would have been obsolete. They probably would have sent Gesicki to the Raiders and we would have took Waller and all that stuff. But to think... The plaque that Chris Greer would have gotten if he could have pulled off a trade for Tyreek Hill and Darren Waller, and I know some people are like, there's no way he could get both. If you look at what did Darren Waller get with the Giants this year, Giants got Darren Waller for a 3rd round pick. So if the Dolphins were able to pull that off last year, we would have had our first pick in the 4th round when we took Izukoma. So I would have done it. They probably were asking for more, though, if I'm being honest with you. They definitely were asking for more. And some other news, right? Barry Jackson came out and said the Dolphins are looking at defensive tackle and defensive. So he says Dolphins look at defensive tackle depth, book draft visits with defensive ends. Offensive tackle and tight end might be the most glaring of the Dolphins' few remaining needs, but they're also not the only ones. With John Jenkins having left for the Raiders, the Dolphins need to add at least one player to back up nose tackle Raekwon Davis. They also seem to be interested in bringing in a couple of young defensive ends to develop. They're using at least 2, probably more, of their 3 permitted draft visits on defensive ends. They have booked one of their 30 visits with Bowling Green's defensive end / tackle Carl Brooks. They also summoned Nebraska defensive end Garrett Nelson to the team headquarters on Tuesday, according to Cornhuskers source. So Brooks, who is 280 pounds, had 27.5 sacks, 46 tackles for a loss in 5 years at Bowling Green, including 10 sacks last season. NFL.com Zerline said Brooks, the inclination to shrug off Brooks' production based on level of competition or because of the questions about his professional fit might be a mistake. Brooks' snap, quickness, footwork, and hand usage and motor are all translatable play qualities. His movement and counters are intuitive, allowing for quick access into the backfield against the pass. He frequently beats tackles as a bull rush off the edge, which that sounds pretty good to me. There's the possible of Michigan's Smith, who's a really good run stuffer. These are all guys that will probably be our 6th or 7th round pick, unless the Dolphins make a move. Again, there could be draft day trades where they make a move with Cedric Wilson Jr. to get back into the 4th or the 5th round. But that seems like, they might be, like Barry Jackson said, trying to get the young talent. Might move on from Emmanuel Ogbah next year. And then, if we can somehow find a diamond in the rough in the later rounds and bring in a defensive end who could take over, why not? But I found that interesting. Then the last thing I want to talk about is Daniel Fusi. I apologize for butchering your name. He came out with an article saying, what roster moves could the Dolphins make next after the first wave of free agency? And I found this very interesting because he talks about 3 positions. First, he talks about the right tackle. He says the Dolphins have yet to add clear competition for Austin Jackson, who was limited to only 2 games in 2022 because of an ankle injury. Miami re-signed Kendall Lamb and Garen Christensen, but both projected as reserves. Robert Hunt can play right tackle, but the Dolphins likely have his potential at right guard and have not entertained the switch. It makes no sense to put Hunt at right tackle, but he's not wrong there, and that's where my frustration and some others' frustration comes from, is because it's not March anymore. People have said, Doug, it's March. You're getting all bent out of shape. It's March. It's not March anymore. We're now into the first week of April. They're now focusing on the draft, so they're not going to be adding any right tackles at this point. He says in free agency, in the first 2 weeks of free agency, the Dolphins opted to not dole out big dollars to some of the top offensive tackles available. At the NFL's annual meeting last week, head coach Mike McDaniel said decision makers are taking our time with the market and seeing how that plays out. There's some stuff we have in thoughts of the draft, but of course that will be addressed. Brandon Shell, who started 11 games last season, remains unsigned, while Cameron Fleming, who recently visited the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Bill Turner are other veteran options on the right side. I would prefer Cameron Fleming over Bill Turner. We all know about Bill Turner. He was with us. And then he talks about the draft. He says on a conference call last week, ESPN draft analysts Matt Miller and Jordan Reed named BYU's Blake Freeland and Syracuse's Matthew Bergeron as possible options for the Dolphins with number 51 overall pick. Reed said Freeland could have versatility at tackle and guard, while Miller lauded Bergen's run blocking. Me and Bro Schmo are going to talk about that either tomorrow or Friday. We're going to go into the offensive line as a whole and see who can go where. It's going to be probably a long video because we're going to talk about the entire offensive line. Then Daniel talks about tight ends. He says that the Dolphins lost 3 tight ends this offseason, Gesicki, Hunter Long, and Sathan Carter, but signed Eric Sorber and extended Durham Smythe. Tanner Connor is the only other tight end under contract for 2023. So the Dolphins right now only have 3 tight ends on the team. He said about free agency, Sorber has mainly been an inline blocker in his NFL career, but has skills as a pass catcher that could be showcased in McDaniel's scheme. Drew Sample and Tyler Croft have played in similar offenses and could execute blocking responsibilities while also providing upside in the receiving game. Then he talks about the draft. And this is where I really hope with that first pick in the second, our first pick overall in the second round, they take a tight end. He says Miller and Reed listed Oregon State's Luke Musgraves, Iowa Sam Laporta, and South Dakota State's Tucker Kraft as potential targets at number 51. Musgrave, who dealt with injuries in college, was noted to be fantastic all-around player, while Laporta was called a bully over the middle. I'm kind of leaning towards Laporta. We'll talk more about that when I do mock drafts. I know people want Washington, but me and Broshmo talked about it. And Washington, as much as he's a physical freak, that physicality, him being tall and long and heavy, doesn't fit to him being a good route runner. So I'm kind of getting stale on that. And then finally, he talks about defensive line. He says the Dolphins have a strong core that includes Christian Wilkins, Zach Sealer, Emmanuel Ogbah, and Raekwon Davis. The return of Ogbah, who missed the majority of the season with a tricep injury, should decrease the workload of Wilkins and Sealer, but Miami still needs depth, particularly behind Davis after the departure of John Jenkins, who signed with the Raiders. Same thing that Barry said. In free agency, he says Akeem Hicks and Ashawn Robinson are veteran defensive linemen who've played in defense according to Vic Fangio's scheme or a variation of it. And Fangio, who spent time as a consultant for the Eagles last season, may have knowledge of Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, who signed with Philly in the middle of the year as a rotational interior defender. If the Dolphins bring back Ndamukong Suh for depth for one more year, Suh went to the Rams to get a ring. Could he come back to Miami to try to get a ring? Because the Dolphins, like I've said time and time again, are in that 2-year window, especially with the way the contracts are set up. And imagine they bring back Ndamukong Suh for a year. Talks about the draft. He says the Dolphins have scheduled to visit with Bowling Green's defensive lineman Carl Brooks, day 2 prospect who recorded 16.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons, and Alabama's Byron Young is a day 2-3 prospect who projects an early down run defender in the NFL. So overall, kind of looking at the depth of whether they can add, it doesn't seem like what I'm hearing from Daniel that they're going to probably do linebacker, but if defensive line, they do need depth. And the thoughts of Akeem Hicks, Ashawn Robinson, Linval Joseph, and Ndamukong Suh, I would be happy with that, because it's not like we're bringing them in to be 4-down players. We're bringing them in to be that veteran backup behind Raekwon Smith. That's Davis. Sorry, Raekwon Davis. I don't know why I say Raekwon Smith. Raekwon Davis, and that interests me. I perked up a little bit, especially when I saw Ndamukong Suh. Could he come back to Miami for a year? Are you guys intrigued by that as much as I am? The right tackle situation, you guys know how I feel about that. I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's an urgency to them, and I understand that stuff can happen, trades can happen, people can get caught. I understand that. But the fact that they don't see it as an urgency kind of worries me, because it's the blind side of your quarterback that you're picked up the 5th-year option for, and he's your franchise quarterback right now. Kind of worries me. And then when it comes to tight end, Miami has a ton of options. If not with that 2nd-round pick, the 3rd-round pick, there still might be some really good guys there. Again, I'm going to do mock drafts. I might do 2 different mock drafts, one with trades, one without trades, and all that stuff. But it'll be fun. But that's what I got for you today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Got some updates on Smite's contract. We could have gotten Darren Waller, defensive line depth, and who's a possibility out there. But I hope you guys enjoy it, and hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Like usual, stay classy. That ends up.